Great. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about what are the things that you, as a parish or a town council, must publish on your website. Now, it's quite interesting that we here at Aubergine we support something close to 600 councils in England and Wales, and I would say that at the beginning of almost every single project, there is always confusion as to what the parish or the town council should be publishing on its website, as well as how to publish stuff. So the vast majority of the session today is going to be talking about what are the things that you must publish. But we definitely will be also drifting into the things that you should be putting on your website and how best to achieve it. So I'm assuming that everybody on the session today, you've got some kind of control over your website and you are uploading stuff, you're adding pages, that kind of thing. So let's move on. And the slides I'm going to share, they'll be shared on an email with everybody afterwards. So who needs to know what I'm talking about? Well, all officers, all council officers that have control over your website, whether it's clerks, deputy clerks, website administrators, compliance officers, comms and marketing people. If you have control over publishing on your parish or your town council's website, this is for you. So like I say, I'm going to go through the things that you must publish as well as the things that you should publish. There are, of course, rules. We'll go through that in a second. The rules of publishing apply to all parish and town councils, no exception. There are a slightly different set of rules for parish meetings. We aren't going to be going into those today. So let's talk about that. The rules are, they're going to be determined by the turnover. So precept, income, expenditure. As I'm sure you all know, but this again is the starting point of the refresher session. If your turnover does not exceed 25k, you fall under Transparency Code for Smaller Authorities. If your turnover exceeds 200k, you fall under the Local Government Transparency Code. Now, if you fall in between that, like the vast majority of councils in England and Wales, you must, as a minimum, follow the Small Authorities Transparency Code, but with an aim to follow as many of the Local Government Transparency Code aspects as you can. It is, I know it's been around, this is its 10th year, isn't it? 2015. 10 years Transparency Code has been kicking around. So hopefully everybody's going to get to grips with what they should and they shouldn't be published by the end of today. So we're going to start with those parishes, and I think it's fair to say that we can be quite specific about saying that it's parishes who've got turnovers of less than 25k. So let's get stuck into these things. There are some core aspects that must be published. So, council information. You must publish a list of your members, your councillors, and the responsibilities. And Caroline, if I could just ask you, pop yourself on mute, please. Got a lot of background noise. Thank you so much.
Sorry, dog's
so you must publish your council members and their responsibilities. If you are a political council, you've got to put their party information on there too. Again, other core council information, contact details of the clerk. It is surprising just how many parish council websites don't have any contact details of the clerk, and they rely solely on a web form that rarely works. This is a very common occurrence. As a tip, as a piece of guidance, I would always recommend that if you have a web form if you have a form, an inquiry form on your website, check it every couple of weeks. Put your own details in, submit it, and make sure it turns up in your inbox. We hear all too often people say to us, "Oh, we don't get much through that," and then when you actually test it, you realize it hasn't been working for weeks. If that is going to be your only primary method of people being able to contact the council, make sure it works. But it is absolutely recommended that the name of the clerk and the main contact details for the clerk are published on the website. Now, Running alongside that, obviously, you've got your list of your members. There must be registers of interest for all of the councillors. It might be that you have a form and there's a form and it's a PDF and you can add that to the website. But it might be that it's just simply a link to the relevant page on your principal authority's website. Either is fine, but they must be, access to it must be displayed. Now, moving on, let's talk about the financial info that's got to be on there. Again, these are surprising things that come up and are questioned as to why or should they be on a website. Your budget and your precept information, that should be on there. And it's sensible to have it as a breakdown of total income and expenditure. Now, if you are under 25k turnover, you should publish a list of all of your payments over £100. Now, there's a couple of different ways to doing that. You might have those elements that are included in your minutes. That's fine. But you might choose to have that as a separate document that you keep updating and adding to the website from time to time. That is preferred. Certainly the feedback that we get from audit firms is it's preferred that you do have a separate document that is essentially updated each time you do a batch of payments. And of course, you must have your end of year accounts and the audit stuff, which we'll get into audit on the next slide. So often, I would say of all of these things, often probably 50% of these are not being met. Now, like I say, we look after between sort of 500 and 600 councils, and I would say that almost without exception, once or twice a week, we will take on a new council where half of these things aren't on there. Now, it might be a mistake, or it might just be a lack of awareness, really. So hopefully this is proving as being a bit helpful. So if we move on, these are some more aspects that need to be published for smaller authorities. Your meetings, this is an obvious one. So agendas and minutes, published 3 clear days before the meeting, minutes within 30 days of the meeting. Dates and details of when the meetings are going to take place. Now, I'm going to cover agendas and minutes in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. But if we now move on to some governance type aspects, your standing orders of financial regulations have got to be on there, along with all ratified policies and procedures. Now, that includes a privacy policy and an accessibility statement. Often these are considered separate things, but they are policies, so they do need to be reviewed by council regularly and ratified. Especially if you're going through the process of having a new website built, it's the time to look at that accessibility statement and the privacy policy to make sure that it is relevant and reflecting the position of the website, the data that's being displayed and the information that's being displayed. And of course, if you are going to rewrite it, it's got to go to council for ratification. Now, one of the big chunks of governance, obviously, is AGAR. 5 years of AGAR, financial regs say that you've got to have on the website. 5 years. Now, obviously, that's going to include a handful of documents, the notices, the governance statements, audit reports, exemption certificates, and such like. Here's a tip. Don't use the website as the only source of these pieces of information. This is something that we see quite a lot. What happens is that the website becomes a dumping ground, and we'll come on to that in a minute, and it becomes the only place where perhaps the AGAR is stored, and it disappears from the clerk's computer or the records, and one laptop dies and another laptop comes in, and you end up having this situation where the historical meeting minutes and AGAR and such like are the only place they are available is on the website. This is not good practice. The website is just a display place. You must, of course, keep these files in the council's records. And of course, this is an incredibly unlikely scenario, but when it comes to publishing salaries, if their salaries are greater than 50k a year, that's got to be published on the website. But of course, that is incredibly unlikely given the fact that the turnover is less than 50k. Sorry, 25k. So that's it. Surprisingly, let's just recap. Surprisingly, for a parish council with a 25K turnover or less, there we go. Sorry, there's the slide. The amount of things that need to be on there are surprisingly low. But let's bust a little myth here. I want to talk about agendas and minutes. There is nothing that defines that you must have a set number of years of minutes and agendas on the website. Often, there is a misunderstanding that it just needs to be years and years and years and just forever accumulate. The rules are that you as a council must retain the meeting documentation forever in its records, but not on the website. It is recommended that you have 2 full years of minutes so that it spans at least one whole financial, precept. That's a good thing. But actually, you don't need to have the agendas on them. You obviously do need to publish them, but you don't need to. It's good practice to have the agenda and the minutes side by side, of course, but you don't need to keep those all forever on your site. Now, I'm going to bust another myth. You do not need to add the signed minutes to the website. The signed minutes obviously need to be retained as the official record in the council's records, but not on the website. This is creating 2 problems. One is the only way to have a signed version of the documents would be to scan the minutes. This creates an accessibility issue because scans are not accessible. And of course, because it is a council produced document, those documents have got to meet accessibility regulations and scans do not. Secondly, you are including signatures in the public domain. Now, whilst ultimately discoverable, we are seeing a large number of issues rising from the fact that nefarious individuals, fraudsters, whatever, are gleaning signatures from AGAR, from minutes, and using those in bank fraud. And this is rising. You do not need to have the signatures on the website. If you want to add the official signed document, it must be in addition to an accessible one. But I would strongly recommend that you redact the signature from the scan before you upload it. So if we move on, now obviously there are exceptions. The AGAR files are just straight scans, and hopefully, and in not too long a time, AGAR will become digital. So there won't be a need to put scans on there. But that's still to come. So let's move on to if you are a council that has a precept greater than 25K or turnover greater than 25K, and also if you are over 200K turnover. This is what you must publish. So the description of the council's responsibilities and the structure, that's a difference compared to if you were parish council. The structure is important. Contact details is the same. Declarations of interest or registers of interest for the councillors and senior staff. That's a difference. Another aspect, and this is usually when it comes to the differences between smaller authorities and larger, it's almost always financial related. So details and the breakdown of council's budget, that's an important aspect. Individual payments, individual expenditure items greater than £500. Now, for the most part, larger councils are going to have probably a finance committee, and the individual payments are going to be on the finance committee minutes. But if they're not, then they can be added as a separate document, but they do need to be identified. Obviously, like before, precept information is really important, and also how much council tax is set. Now, let's move on then to a little bit of the other governance aspect. Annual accounts and audits, much like the parish. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but it is, again, 5 years of all of your AGAR documents. Now, here's another interesting aspect. So salaries of senior staff, with the salary being greater than 50K, that needs to be published. This is very, very often missed. And another aspect that is often missed is grant information. If you as a council offer grants of any kind, you've got to publish what it is and how somebody can apply for it, whether it's open or closed, and how somebody can apply for it. It's recommended that you have a sensitive information removed list of where the grants have been delivered to. So, as an example, so the town's local scout group, for example, applied for such and such a grant and it was awarded. That's really important information. It's unlikely to affect small parishes, but that is certainly for those who are larger authorities. So moving on, we've got, again, quite a number of other things here. Again, agendas and minutes. There are no fixed amount of years that you've got to have these documents on there. The publishing times are still exactly the same as if you were parish, but usually the demand on a larger authority for people to have access to previous minutes can be quite high. The number of requests for people. So you might like to think about having maybe 3 years worth of minutes just to reduce and keep down the number of inquiries people asking for historical copies. They're going to be self-serving, but from a what should you be publishing? Really, there is nothing other than it is recommended you should have at least one whole year. In the same way as parish, dates and locations of up and coming meetings, not just full council, but also committees as well. Again, the same as smaller authorities and those parish and towns that have got turnovers greater than 25K, but perhaps less than 200K, which is actually the lion's share. 5 years of AGAR. So the audit notices, the starting of the audit, the closing of the audit, and all of the governance statements and reports. Those have got to be on there. We find actually a really good way to display this is to have this on a finance page. So at the top of the page, you would have your budget and precept information, you would have your expenditure information, and then you have your AGAR. And so it keeps all of that finance and audit in one neat place. I'm gonna just gonna show you an example here. So if I scoot over to our friends over at Stony, perhaps if I can just, because it's difficult for me to see whether you're seeing that or not, perhaps if I could just ask Michelle from East Peckham, because you're at the top of my list, can you see Stony Stratford?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much.
Just a quick thing, where you displaying your screen,
yeah.
I don't know if it's because I'm on my iPad at the moment, but where you've got the side view of the slides, it's pushing the main slide slightly off page, so I can't read all of it.
All right, thank you so much.
You can just show
I'll adjust that when we switch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to show you that finance page that I referred to earlier on. And so let's just go, here we go, finance. So what you can see here, this is a really neat way and a very, very, to avoid the phrase transparent, this is a very transparent way of displaying the information. It's the start, the beginning, and the end of money when it comes to councils. As you can see there on the top left-hand side, here's the precept information. Moving over to the right-hand side, here's the budget and list of expenditure items. And of course, then you've got your historical years of AGAR, just like that. And so, like I say, that's the whole story, if you like, when it comes to finance. This is a very neat way. We certainly get a lot of positive feedback from audit firms who display the information in this way. So just going to scoot back to the slides there. Whoops, there we go. And I think if I press this, so this movie there, if I press this, Michelle, does that improve things?
Do you know what? Actually it hasn't, so it must be my screen.
Oh, okay.
It's still
All
running
right.
off, it's still running off even more actually, so it must be me. But thank
Okay.
you.
All right. All right. So, let's move on to the things that I would say are they drift between what you must publish and what you should publish, and that's services. Now, obviously, parish councils, you there will be very limited number of services that you provide, but nonetheless, you should display those on your website. These are the things that the parish council look after. It may be something as simple as, dare I say it, dog bins, but nonetheless, you should display it. Obviously, if you are a larger parish or a town council, you do need to very clearly define what the services that you provide and what the services the principal authority or authorities provide. You might have a borough or district in between you and the county, or you might be unitary. But you do need to define, if you are providing services that come out of the precept, you've got to define it. You are ultimately responsible for those services. It's just gonna, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scoot over to our here we go. I'm just gonna scoot over to another one of our example councils. Let's just go there now. Won't give you a moment. I've got the screen there. Open up that browser. If we start sharing, gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm struggling to exit this screen here, but let's try again. There we go. Great. Okay, so we're going to go back to one of our example councils here, and let's share that. Great. So we're looking at Stony, and the reason why I wanted to direct you to Stony was it's about signposting. If we mouse over on the council, what you'll see on the menu system, and this is a really good recommendation that I'd ask you to look at your own sites. Make it very clear to the users where to go. Signposting is probably one of the biggest fail points of most local authority websites. People don't know where to go for what services. Most people get it wrong. Most people just assume that if there's a pothole or there's a street light out, that it's going to be the parish or the town council. Obviously, in most cases, that's wrong. So whilst it's always going to be there, you can reduce that and make it more easier for people to understand by setting your signposts, your menu systems out like this. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, these are the things that the council are responsible for. And then on the right-hand side, sorry, and then on the right-hand side, your principal authority. Now, you might have three, and that's fine. You can separate it out. But as a user, the signposting is really, really helpful for me. And you can set these up. And so these things on the left-hand side, these are the things that the town council is responsible for, usual sort of things, allotments, defibs, play parks. But then over here, these are the things that principal authority are for. Big one of those always is planning, making sure that the link goes off to the planning page on the principal authority's website. You can create a link, things like missed bins, and direct them to go to that page on the website. This will very, very much reduce the number of unnecessary inquiries that you get as a council, but it also helps people start to learn and understand who looks after what. So this is a good way of setting the menu up. As we scroll down, another really good way to make sure that your website does a lot of the heavy lifting. Ultimately, your your role as a parish or a town council isn't to deliver all services, but your role is very much about saying it's not us, but it's over here. Now, your website is you 24/7. Now, I fully appreciate that just between all of us here, you probably feel like you already work 24/7. But the website's going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting when you're not there. So make it work harder for you. Set up buttons, set up links on your site that address those really common things that people in your parish, people in your town get wrong in terms of the services provided. So what we're looking at here, this is a good example, okay? Stony Stratford. I'm just going to scroll to the bottom here. So what you're looking at on here, buttons, signposts, they achieve the same thing. What you're looking at here are 6 buttons. These buttons are based on the accumulative number of phone calls and emails at a certain period of time that they received from members of the public. So if they're always getting phone calls about, who's going to cut the grass, why is that overgrown, or when we've missed a bin collection, or potholes, street light out, all those kind of things, let the website serve your parishioners better by putting these buttons on your site to signpost them to the correct authority. Now, it might be you, and in which case, then you're going to need to put a page on there that encompasses the information. But for the most part, it's going to be directing them to a principal authority. And by doing this, that's based on when the phone rings or when the emails come in, what are people always asking about? By doing this, this is going to reduce your workload and have a positive effect on the user, because they're going to be able to much more quickly and easily help themselves. And I would say that if you were to deploy this on your homepage, think about the most common things. If you were to deploy that on your homepage, you would get a lot better feedback from your parishioners, whether you're a large town or a small parish. It's all about user experience. So whilst having these signposts, these buttons on your website isn't a legal requirement, it is definitely a recommended thing, because you are saying to people, we do this, we do that, they do this, they do that. And that's a helpful tip. And of course, it's going to be different from place to place. There are going to be some things that are very relevant to one parish or one town, and irrelevant to another. But I'd imagine that there's going to be a lot of commonality. For example, planning. I would say that of all of the sites that we manage, one of the most common homepage buttons is planning, that then directs the user straight off to the principal authority's planning site. So let's just go back to our slides. So where did we got to? Okay, so we got to here. So we are looking at those larger parishes and towns, those that are operating over 200K turnover. Again, in the same way as the parish, you've got to have all of your ratified policies and procedures, and also it's recommended that you have your FOI publication scheme. Now, another aspect that is different for this size of authority compared to the smaller parishes is contracts and tenders. You have to have available all of the significant contracts and tenders that are active at that time. You may choose to have a separate page if there are a good number of them, but if there isn't that much, then you might choose to just have it on your finance page. My advice would be have a separate contracts and tenders page, because what you're doing is you're setting up a good legacy. You might not always have, you might not have something at the moment, but you might in the future. So I'm just going to kind of revisit going back to our signpost, because whilst it's important to focus on the things that you must have, and there's a definitive list that essentially when we'll share these slides with you and you can take them away and have it as a checklist, the signposting is really the cherry on the cake in terms of making that website work for you. Good, clear signposting. Go here for this, go there for that. See if you can adjust your menu system so that you can create a set of links that are the things that you do, and a set of links that go off to the relevant page on your principal authorities sites. Often having a page, a page on the website that's got maybe 2 columns. These are the things that the parish or the town council do. These are the things that such and such a borough or district do, or county. That's a very good visual way to direct to use social media. Every now and again you can do a Facebook post just to remind people who looks after what, um, and um, and again, setting it up on your menu system is a really good way of doing it. Now, earlier on I was talking about um, minutes and agendas, or agendas and minutes. We always call it minutes and agendas, but actually agendas and minutes is the right way of saying it. um, There's no specific rules other than publishing the agenda 3 clear working days before the meeting, and minutes, draft minutes within 30 days of the meeting. Obviously, you must keep the documents forever. That's what I've stated. But in terms of on the website, a couple of years is probably all that you need. Now, they don't need to be the signed ones, but they do need to be the ones that you keep in your records. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned already is not to use the website as your storage place, as your cloud storage for your meeting documents. Unfortunately, we have seen on too many occasions councils operate in that way, and it might be that the website gets hacked. It might be that the website has a technical problem, and if the council haven't kept the records in their local files, it's a problem. Often, if there's a change of clerk or a change of council staff, we see the situation where the website is the only place to get some of the agar because there's no records that have been stored on old computers, old laptops, older minutes as well. So it's always a good idea to make sure, whilst this isn't a publish on your website aspect, it's making sure that, do you know where all of the historical agars are on your computer or the network? Do you know where all the minutes and the agendas are, and the meeting papers? Are they somewhere you can go to? And are they backed up? Do you have a backup process for any of those files? We're going to move on to something slightly different now. And this aspect is forms. What do I mean by forms? Well, when you go to a web page, it's something that people can fill in to send you information. Often this is misunderstood in terms of what you do and you don't need to do. If you have forms on your website, they must be accessible. What do I mean by that? I mean, they must be an actual form that you can fill in on the web page. They should not be Word documents. They should not be PDFs, because you're creating a barrier, not just an accessibility barrier, but also a socio-economic one. If you upload Word documents as forms, that's fine. We're all council professionals. We've all got Microsoft Office, but not everybody in our parishes and our towns also has a paid for Microsoft subscription. So uploading Word documents is a problem. You should have a form. So a typical example is the one on the screen right there. And again, for full transparency, I'm pleased. It's a good job I'm not here in the room physically, because you might throw something at me. But I'm a counsellor of 12 years in my private life. But I also look at our parish website, obviously. And we have a memorial garden application form, and it's online. We have a plot for the cemetery application form. It's online, because people need to be able to fill these forms in from their phone, and that's a really important aspect. Phone or computer, they've got to be able to fill it in. Looking at website visitor analytical data, as we do every week, so across 500-600 sites, we look at the analytical data. We know that more than 85% of all councils, whether parish or town, all of their website visitors use a phone to connect with the council. The data of those using laptops and desktops primarily comes from users within the council. So making sure that forms on your website and the files and the general accessibility of the content is really critical, making sure that they work on the phone. If you have forms on your website, test them on the phone. Forms um, don't always work, and they also don't always work in the mobile environment because the way that they are technically created has a greater number of potential problems. So it's good practice, as I said right at the start of the webinar, it's good practice every couple of weeks. Just use your phone, go onto the forms on your website and fill them in and submit them. And just make sure that they work, the data can be submitted, and also it turns up in your inbox. Forms are an important and legal compliance aspect when it comes to accessibility, but also a really good user experience element. They are the way that we get data and information from members of the public and our parishioners. So if you have any pages on your website that have got forms, make sure that they aren't forms that need to be kind of opened up in Word or downloaded and printed out. They've got to be something that you fill in. Now, it might be that there are some complex forms. Let's just say you have a market where you are and you have a market trader application form. That's fine. Again, that would be online, but you would probably need to get things like insurance certificates or liability certificates from there. You need to think about how can they get those to you. So I'm just going to move on as a bit of a reminder, because for all of these things of the things that you must publish, we still have that theme, that thread of meeting accessibility. Everything, as a reminder, everything that the council produces in terms of documents and its web pages must be accessible. The current regulations are WCAG 2.2 AA. They changed in October. What's excluded from that currently are AGAR, because they are handwritten bits of paper that are often scanned in. Your councillor's declarations of interest, again, they might be scanned pieces of paper signed. And the other exclusion is third-party documents. So as an example, when you are putting your meeting pack together, you'll have the agenda, you produce the agenda, that needs to be accessible. But you might have some documents that have been given to you by third parties, maybe the local police or a letter from the air ambulance or something like that. That doesn't need to be accessible, but when you display it on your website, you do need to make sure that you state on there that there is potentially some non-accessible content because it's been provided by third parties. Going back to the minutes and the agendas, don't use scans of minutes and agendas. A short anecdote, we took on a parish council about 6 months ago, and they had something close to 80 gigabytes of file storage used on their old website. And we just couldn't figure out why. And it turned out that they had a scan, a high resolution scan of every page of the minutes and the agendas going back to 2015. And it amassed a gigantic data pack. You do not need to scan the minutes and the agendas. The document that you produce out of Microsoft Word, hopefully, and you turn it into an accessible PDF, that is perfect. As I mentioned earlier on, and I can't actually stress this enough, avoid sharing documents online that have got signatures. You do not need to share signed documents online. You do need to have the documents signed, obviously, but they can be retained in the council's records. Having the signatures online is creating a real problem. Obviously, at the moment, the way AGAR is, that's going to be a tricky one. You might like to consider using your Adobe Acrobat to redact the signatures. So we're coming a little bit more towards the end now here. And this is more about a best practice guidance. A website is not a dumping ground. A website is not a place that you should just, oh, I've added it to the website there, it's fine, it's done. The website is your hardest working support, because it's out there talking to lots and lots of people, delivering info when you can't be. So it needs to be kept light and well functioning. Going back to those homepage signposts, that's really important. That's going to save you a lot of time and hassle, but also give your parishioners a good user experience. But purely from a well functioning process, remove older documents that are no longer relevant. And why is this important? Well, Google and other search engines index every file and every page of a website. It doesn't know if they're out of date. And what happens is you can have, if you have a website that's got two versions of a document, Google will have indexed both versions, but parishioners won't necessarily know which one is the right one. So if there is a document that's been superseded, remove it from the website and replace it with the correct one. Just having it in the media library or admin area of your website, even if it's not linked to or displayed on the website, it's still indexable. Google can still find it. So if it's not relevant or it is inaccurate, remove it from the website's media library or file storage. Because also, it might be that some of those older documents present a GDPR issue. It's not uncommon for there to be some information about members of the public or something like that that have been referenced in documents, and they need to be removed. So making sure that what you add to the website is okay to be live and accessible, and if there's stuff on there that's old, remove it. Also, much like anything, it's not full. It's not got thousands and thousands of files that the website's got to cycle through to deliver the pages. It will run better, it will run faster, and you won't be essentially amassing as we often call it, a GDPR time bomb. If you just keep filling it up with files and not really knowing that they're there and auditing them every now and again, you could be creating a legacy problem. So look, we've come to the end now of this morning's session. I'm hoping that you found it a useful refresher. I'm sure that you all knew all of this, but often these things act as a helpful refresher. I'd be really happy to answer any questions if anybody's got any. You can pop them in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute.
Hi, just a quick question. So I'm making note, and apologies, you may have said it and I just missed it as I was making notes. When you said that we have to, under the financial information, we have to state the salaries of senior staff over a set threshold.
50K.
So over 50K, okay. I thought you mentioned that somewhere, but I wasn't sure if it was for both. Thank you.
It was on the slide where we talk about smaller parishes, because if they've got a turnover of less than 25K, then they won't have senior members that have got.
Yeah, because on a bigger parish, although we're actually a small one, but we have a much bigger preset for a tiny parish because we do so much, and that's why I kind of missed it, because obviously listening more to the bigger one.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions? I can see a few typed out questions here. So one of the questions here is, are there many differences between WCAG 2.1 and WCAG 2.2? It's a good question. It's probably a little bit of a deviation of this morning's session, but I'm more than happy to provide a little bit of an overview. The principles of good website accessibility remain as you have already been taught and trained. Descriptive links, so don't use click here's, making sure your documents are accessible, using heading structures to the page, adding alt text to your images, and making sure that there's good levels of contrast. Those are your basic principles. The differences between WCAG 2.1 and 2.2 are actually mostly technical ones. They are really, they include things like buttons and links, and the way it is coded. I'll give you an example. When you go to a website and the cookie bar pops up, often before the cookie bar gets in the way of the rest of the website. Well, WCAG 2.2 says that can't happen. You can't have something being obscured by something else. So you'll notice if you're an Aubergine website customer, you'll notice that we have the formal .gov.uk cookie bar that pushes down from the top. It's not obscuring anything else. But for the most part, the differences between 2.1 and 2.2 are technical. So just carry on doing your normal accessible publishing techniques that you've been doing. Now we've got a question here. I can't see who it's from, but it says, "Do we need to publish accompanying agenda?" Yeah, I think John's kind of asked the question that I was going to ask there, and that is, does associated papers need to be published along with the agendas? They need to be given to council, but they don't need to be published on the website.
Can I jump in there?
You can, John.
My information was that it does have to be published on the website, because information that backs up the arguments that councillors could use during a meeting have to be available prior to the meeting for members, residents, so that they have the chance to come along to that meeting if they sense that something that's being provided isn't actually what they agree with or they want to support.
I think that's a guidance thing, John.
Right.
Rather than written.
That's good practice then.
It's good practice for sure. Yeah, I mean, certainly I would always encourage uploading associated documents with an agenda, but it's not defined in transparency.
Right. Okay.
But I would definitely recommend doing it.
Mm. Don't blame me for that, everyone.
Obviously, there's sometimes practical aspect they could view. So we've got another question there. Where's the next question there? Laura, I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
Looks like
So
there's a
we have
question
a
there
question
from Alison.
Alison. Yeah, for councils over 200k, mention was made of senior staff publishing their register of interest.
Yeah.
Is this for staff over a salary threshold or for the clerk as senior staff member to do? Not something I've come across.
Yeah, senior staff member. It's an interesting point. It comes up very, very rarely, but it is defined in Transparency Code for larger authorities that it's for senior staff.
Thank you, Mark. And there was one from Michelle again. Have you seen that one about the grant information?
It's disappeared from my view.
Okay.
So if you could help share that with me.
Yeah, we'll do. So that's grant information. Do we have to publish info on the applications received, / granted, or just what the councils offer?
You have to publish available grants. You have to publish what the process is to apply for it, and you have to publish to who it was awarded, but obviously retaining the sensitive information. But you don't need to publish who applied for it, because there might be some rejections in there. Does that answer your question?
Is that okay, Michelle? Yes,
okay.
She says
Great.
Thank you.
Great. I can't see any more questions there, Laura.
No, there doesn't appear to be any more in the chat, and I can't see any more hands up at the moment. So unless anyone wants to shout out, I haven't seen a hand. So please do so, but there doesn't appear to be any hands up at the moment. So
all right.
Well,
look, it leaves me just to say thank you all so much for attendance this morning. Laura, I will share the slides with you shortly,
thank you.
so that it can be distributed. My contact details are on the screen, and they will also be on the slide. So if you do have any questions that spring to mind afterwards, or you would prefer to ask me in confidence, please feel free to email me directly.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark. I'd just like to thank Mark very much for the informative session today. Really helpful and supportive as ever to Calc. Thank you so much, Mark. We've got another couple of sessions with Mark in the next week, and also the week after, tips and tricks and compliance, I think we're talking about. But Mark's also at the Chairmanship Conference as well. So if anyone would like to see Mark again, we're at the Chairmanship Conference at Appledore on the 27th of February. Okay, thank you everyone for coming today, and thanks, Mark, again. Take care, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.